This video is about your great-grandmother, Lila Steele Judd. She is Grandma Charlotte Tracy's mother. She lived in Pleasant Grove as I was growing up and died when I turned 8 years old. So I don't have a lot of personal memories of her, but fortunately, she wrote her own biography. She actually wrote a few of them, and so most of this is going to be able to come from her own words. She starts out her autobiography with a message for you. Dear grandchildren, I am about to embark upon the task of writing for you a history of my life. This shall not be easy, for, as I understand histories, they are supposed to be long and sentimental. For some reason, nothing to me has ever been such. I have always loved attention, and since I have never been good-looking or talented in music, I found myself greatly lacking. Lila went on to describe how her older sister, Abigail, would move her audiences to tears with her orations or her recitations of dramatic poems and whatnot. And so Lila decided she wanted to try the same thing to see if she could get that kind of attention. As soon as I was able to read, I began to memorize these poems. And believe me, I gave them all the expressions of Abby, plus a few extra impressions of my own. When I felt the time was ripe, I began to recite these poems in public. To my horror, the response from the audience was convulsions of laughter. From that time on, everything I did was greeted with laughter. Seldom did I intend for it to be funny. However, it seemed I had gained my objective. I was noticed, and in a family of 12 children, that was something. And so, dear grandchildren, if during my funeral bits of this history should be read, and the sniffling silence should be broken with an occasional titter or a downright chuckle, I shall be exceedingly happy. I do remember her funeral, and I do remember there was a little bit of laughter. Lila Steele was born on September 12, 1904 in Panguitch, Utah. She was the 8th child and the 4th daughter to grace the home of Mahonri Moriancamer Jr. and Charlotte Moore Lefevre Steele. She had one little brother, Arthello, that was 4 years younger than her, almost to the date. Strange as it may seem, there had been no other children to bridge the gap between us. For 4 long years I had been the baby, and in a family of 9, that was something. The night Art was born, the whole family had gone over to Grandma Steele's place to sleep. We awakened the next morning to a snow-covered world and to the news that I had been dethroned. I now had a baby brother. Excited as I was about the new baby, I couldn't help but feel deflated. The props had been knocked out from under me, and my spirits declined to rock bottom. I remember one afternoon when I came home from school, I found the house deserted. I began to feel sorry for myself. I went out to the south side of the house, and there in the golden autumn sunshine, I began to review my life. I remembered my mother once telling me that I had a baby brother that had died at birth. So, being in a real sad mood, I began to cry. One of Abby's friends came along the sidewalk and heard me crying, so she came in and asked me what was the matter. So I told her my baby brother was dead. She mistook it to be Art, so she rushed out to spread the word to the town folks. By the time Mother and the rest of the family got home, the entire town was there to offer words of sympathy. Needless to say, I got a liberal education from that episode. In July of that year, 1913, I was baptized by my cousin Arthur Bunker in the irrigation canal. I had so much hair I couldn't get it dry in time to go to church to be confirmed, so I had to go with it wet. As soon as school was out in the spring, we moved out to the little community of Sutherland. In about 5 years, we slightly outgrew the little black house, so we built a lovely big house with 5 rooms and a closed closet, which was to serve for a bath. Faye and I were real happy because now we had a room of our own. That is, if Abby wasn't there. Most of the time, she lived in Delta with Grandma. My sister Fern had married the year we lived in Delta, so that left Faye and I, the oldest girls, at home. Our room was the outlet of all our feelings. We decorated it with pictures of movie queens, etc. We wore the furniture out, moving it around from place to place. The mattress on our bed was a straw tick, which we had to empty and fill with new straw every time the wheat was threshed. I love that dear old house on the farm. It was here I experienced many joys and heartaches. While we lived there, my brother Harold and sister Abby were married. During the time I lived there, my older brother Lindsay died with the flu. I remember some mighty miserable days spent there when I had the flu myself. It was from this house my brothers Harold and Doyle left to serve their country. Abby's first baby was born there. It was while we lived in this house that my brother Harold was killed in an accident on the farm after his return from the service of his country. It was from this house we walked 1 3/4 miles to school. At this time in life, all there is left of the dear old house is just a memory. In the summer of the year I graduated from the 8th grade, I went to Delta to live with my grandparents. Grandma Steele was a sickly person and always had to have someone to help her. I didn't have any intentions of going to school past the 8th grade, but since Delta boasted 2 years of high school, come time for school to start, Grandma decided I could go to school and keep house too. Uncle John's family lived in the same block that Grandma did, and I renewed my acquaintance with Clora. The two of us went to school. We had always been the best of friends, so we hit it off real good. I really enjoyed my school year. Clora and I were in all the plays and on all the programs. What she couldn't think of to do, I could. We were often referred to as the Steele kids, and to this day some of my friends still think we were sisters. I was in all the school and church plays, took in all the ball games, and went to all the dances. Clora had quit school her 2nd year and gone to Salt Lake to work, so I had the rest of my high school pretty much to myself. I had plenty of friends, both girls and boys, but no special ones, none that you could call my feller. After graduation, I worked in the store called The Hub for my father, and it was while working there that I had my offer of my first real job. Of course, during my high school days, I had held many jobs, tested cream, clerked, made beds, and did all kinds of housework. Delta farmers raised a lot of alfalfa seed during those days, and several big companies moved into Delta just for the buying season. My uncle, Alf Bunker, knew one of the big bugs of the Western Seed Marketing Company. His name was Mr. Carl G. Bowden. One day he came to see Uncle Alf and told him he was looking for a girl to train to analyze seed. Uncle Alf told him that he knew just the girl for them, and he brought him over and introduced him to me. He offered me $75 per month, and it didn't take him long to hire me. I told him I would go, and within a few hours I found myself on the way to Salt Lake with 2 cigar-smoking executives of the Western Seed Marketing Company. It was while I was working at the store in between seed jobs that I met a handsome bachelor. His name was Ray Judd from Fredonia, Arizona. He had come to town with my brother-in-law, Ed Henry. Ed was in the real estate business, and he had brought Ray to Delta to sell him a farm. It seemed as though Ed and Ray had lived neighbors in the town of Fredonia when they were kids, so Ed took Ray to his house to stay with him. On Sunday, Artie Henry, Ed's niece, and I were walking home from Sunday school. We had decided to go to Artie's place, and we had to pass Ed's and Fern's place to get there. We could smell Fern's dinner cooking, so we decided to go in and see if she would invite us to eat. We were surprised to find she had company, but since we figured he was just a married man, and they invited us to stay for dinner, we accepted. Ed got to kidding us about sitting by Mr. Judd. I said I would sit by him, and Artie said she would sit by him. We finally wound up drawing cuts. I won him fair and square. We sure did feel silly when we found out he was a single man. Ed was trying hard to get him married off so he could sell him a farm. He kept suggesting different old maids in town, but he just couldn't interest him. Finally, he told Ed he kind of had his eye on me, but Ed told him he figured I was spoken for. So he told Ed in that case he didn't need to look any farther. Well, Ed sure did need to sell a farm, so he and Fern both began to work on me. To make a long story short, I might state, Ed sold his farm. Ray and I were married about a year later on the 26th of May, 1926, in the Manti Temple. We moved out to the farm Ed had sold Ray. It was a perfect place for a honeymoon. There wasn't a neighbor within a half-mile. Ray would make fun of my cooking, and I'd get mad and decide to leave him. But before I finished walking the 5 miles to Delta, Ray would get in his little Ford and overtake me. By that time, I was too tired to be mad, so I'd get in with him and away we'd go back to the farm. Our first child, Hilga, was born March 25th, 1927 in Delta. She was a real pretty baby as long as she had her bonnet on. She didn't have any hair, but we loved her just the same. We had a terrible time learning how to raise kids. I thought at times I'd never be able to live through it. Helga wanted to sleep all day and cry all night. But Ray was just the opposite. He wanted to sleep all night, so I didn't get much help from him. On April the 26th, 1928, Ira came along, and by that time I was calloused, and I didn't notice him so much. He seemed to fit in, just like an old shoe. They moved to Sutherland, Utah, and then to Provo. Helen was born on January 16, 1930, and it was about the time the Depression started in earnest. We sold milk in the bottle and delivered it all over town. Some of it we got the money for, and some we traded for doctor bills, dentist bills, permanents, clothing, hay, grain, or what have you. Those were trying years, but everyone was in the same boat, so it didn't really matter. Janelle was born on February 28, 1931. By this time, we had so many kids that I didn't get to go anywhere. Ray was busy delivering milk, and I would sometimes go for weeks without seeing anyone except the family. I had a good neighbor, but she lived through the field from me, and in the winter time it was too muddy to get to her place. When Janelle was about 2 years old, I decided I had to take a stand or die, so I announced I was going to go to church, which I did, me and all the kids. At times when Ray would forget to come home in time for us to use the car, we would walk. Finally, after he could see he couldn't stop me, he began to arrange his schedule so the car was available for us to use. On January 16, 1935, Eileen came to visit us. In fact, she liked us so well she decided to stay. After she got to be about a year old, I started to work in the primary. I was a play leader for 5 years. I made a lot of wonderful friends in the Lakeview ward. In fact, when we left Lakeview, we felt that we would never find another ward quite like it. In the meantime, Ray had to sell the cows as his health was failing him, and we were afraid he would never be able to work again. We decided to buy a place that we could pay for no matter what kind of place it was. It wasn't easy, I assure you. After many days of searching and many sleepless nights, we exchanged $3,000 for the deeds to the home and property, which included 1/4 of those 6 blocks north in Pleasant Grove, Utah. The home was a nice brick 2-storied house. There was just one catch to it. It had only one bottom floor finished. This gave us only 3 rooms and a bath for a family of 7. We thoroughly enjoyed the bathroom. It didn't have a lock on it, so we would knock on the door and count to 10. And if no one screamed, we would decide the coast was clear and go in. We made a bedroom out of the living room, which was just as well as we did, since we had no furniture for it anyway. To make matters more congested, we had a new addition to our family in March of that year. Charlotte was born March 19, 1943. She was very small and, as her dad stated, looked as if she was just an afterthought. We loved her very much, and if I do say so, she was one of the best tended babies in town. Anyone wanting to dodge some small task could always take the baby for a walk. And that little girl on the far right side is your Grandma Charlotte. That's it for this video. Stay tuned for part 2.